Welcome to Some Guy's Garage. We have an empty bench, but don't worry, I have some tools to show you. It's that time of the year where all of us tool channels decide to show you random things from the year, and I'm going to be no different. Might as well follow along here. And so I've got a few tools that I actually haven't shown on this channel entirely. I've shown a couple of them in shorts, but not actually full review videos. So I just wanted to talk about them quickly as a separate video, and some of my favorites that have made this year easier to work on stuff. Maybe, possibly, or just kind of are interesting tools. So if you find that interesting, stay tuned. We're going to go through a bunch of them. Okay, first up, these are actually fairly cheap. They're 20 bucks from Klein, and they're lock nut wrenches. I've been doing some electrical in my basement recently. I'll leave a link to the video for that somewhere in the corner here in the description. And doing a lot of electrical, you end up with these little lock nuts kind of that look like this. So they go into the panel holes and you tighten them down. And these wrenches are designed so that rather than banging it with the end of a flathead screwdriver, you can loop these kind of around the edge and pull them tight this way. And similarly the other direction, and different offsets so that you can get into the panel into tight spots and tighten and loosen them. So they have them for half, 3/4, and 1 inch knockouts, but there are larger versions of these, so they have the different sizes for all that. Magnetic, so they stick together, and pretty cool little tool. Nice and cheap, and would make a good stocking stuffer. Okay, next up is a hammer. This is a Estwing, whatever you want to call it. It's a USA-made Linesman hammer. I'll leave links to everything in the description below. It's used for driving nails, staples, things like that. The thing I like most about it is fairly heavy and a good long reach, so you can actually get into small spots, but it has two different faces on it, which I found really interesting. So there's a smooth face, but there's also this milled face with kind of like, I don't know if you can really see that there, but a bunch of ridges all milled into the face. And I found this actually really good for driving in usually those wire staples that tend to walk or move or wiggle on you and don't go in straight. This helps keep them straight for whatever reason. So even if you're not quite on square, I guess it's still catching the teeth in such a way that it drives them straight. But I found myself using this a whole bunch, again with the basement electrical stuff, to staple all those wires, and works really well. So not a typical hammer that everybody would use. It's not your typical claw hammer or ball peen hammer or something like that, being a linesman hammer, but I've found it quite nice. I think the only downside is they put a couple stickers on it here and here, and those already fell off and left that gooey stuff that even with goo gone hasn't come off entirely yet, but I'll eventually get that cleaned up. But otherwise, really nice hammer. So next up, it's kind of a sneak peek. It's another tool bag I'm working on. I'm not going to show you the insides of this thing just yet, but there is one thing I want to show you that is inside it, so we'll take that out. Hopefully you guys didn't see too much in there. And it is a DeWalt 12-volt screwdriver. So this is not a impact driver. So your typical impact driver, let me grab one of those, looks like this, has the same sort of head and shape, but this impacts when it starts to encounter resistance, whereas this just continues to screw. It's more like a drill, but with a 1/4 inch chuck on it. And I find this incredibly handy for all those little places where you don't want the power of an impact driver, but without the bulk and heft of a drill and having to use the chuck to change bits or anything like that. This is super convenient and probably is one of my favorite tools. I've had this guy, this is the older version of the 12-volt screwdriver for, I don't know, probably going on close to 10 years now. And as you can see, the new one is a much nicer form factor. It's a whole bunch shorter, clutch settings are easier to get at, has just a better weight and balance to it in the hand than this one. And so when this came out, I upgraded pretty much immediately and have been using this quite a bit as well with my basement finishing and just other odd jobs around the house. I grabbed for this more than I would for a larger impact wrench or impact driver. And just while we're here talking about DeWalt cordless tools, I do have the newer DCD 800 and the DCF 850. I plan to do a video on those and a whole bunch of my other DeWalt twisting tools, let's say, so impacts and drills and drivers and stuff like that, doing a comparison. So that'll be coming out hopefully in the next few weeks here, but keep an eye out for that, and I'll talk a little bit more about these as well at that time. So next up, we have a couple Nibx pliers that I've picked up this year. You'll probably seen that I have a bunch of different Nibx pliers. Love them. They all work really great, and they do have some really unique features that I appreciate. So the two we have here today, these are the wire cutters, wire strippers, but they're kind of a combination plier. I did do a short video on these, but they have gripping here at the top, wire stripping. There's also a little hole there that you can actually use for twisting wire. They have a cutter here at the bottom, and you can also cut screws, and they have a nice one-finger lock there at the bottom to lock and unlock the spring-loaded the pliers here. You'll probably see a trend here. I've been doing a lot of electrical work and kind of upgrading some of my toolkit there, and these are definitely part of that. I've been using them on the basement to terminate wire connections, and they work really well. They're probably some of the smoothest wire cutters I've ever had. And then next up we have the Nibx twin grips. So these are kind of a slip joint style plier, similar to these where they have a slip joint, but they're more finely adjustable. The other interesting thing about these is they have a front way to grip screws or anything like that. So you can, sometimes with these, and what I've used them for the most is trying to grab a screw that's potentially has a stripped head and being able to turn it this way without having to get the rest of the head and everything else in there to actually be able to turn it this way. You can do it on a vertical angle because of the teeth in the other direction. So pretty interesting in terms of that. And I really can't talk about Knipex without talking about Pliers wrench. I picked up a few more pairs. I've been throwing them everywhere. They're just the most handy pliers, or wrenches more so than anything. So these are, again, a kind of a slip joint. If you haven't seen them before, they're a slip joint that lets you grab onto nuts and bolts with quite a bit of strength. I'd say they're better than any adjustable wrench. Not quite on the ends, or not quite on the strength of an open-ended wrench, but they work really well and come in a bunch of different sizes. So I have them all the way from really tiny here. These are the 125s, the 180s, the 250s, and then the biggest, the 300s here. But these aren't per se new this year. I've talked about these in the past, but I really do love the Nibx plier wrenches. And really all of the Nibx pliers have been great and some of my favorites in the toolbox. And then last but not least, something else I haven't shown on the channel before, I picked up a new torque wrench. So this is a 1/2-inch drive up to, I think, 250 foot-pounds CDI Torque Wrench. These are actually OEM'd by Snap-on. Snap-on's OEM. I don't know which way the relationship goes, whether CDI makes them for Snap-on or Snap-on owns CDI and CDI makes Snap-on's torque wrenches. But it was time for an upgrade on a torque wrench because this is the one I've been using for a very long time. This is a Mastercraft Maximum one, Canadian Tire, something we get up here in Canada. This has actually been a really good torque wrench. Has worked well, but has started to not click when it gets to the torque value. So you're pulling the wrench and it goes past and doesn't click all the time. There's probably something you could service up in here, but these cost under $100, and trying to send it out to get serviced just wasn't worth it. It would cost almost that much to get them serviced and calibrated. So I figured it was time to upgrade, and that's why I picked up this CDI one. This is so buttery smooth when it clicks over. It just feels really nice in hand, and you feel confident that you're actually hitting the torque values that you expect versus, say, something from Harbor Freight, or in our case up here in Canada, we get Power Fist. These are the $10 to $20 torque wrenches even up here. And again, this is half drive, but the smoothness of the CDI versus the smoothness or lack thereof of something like this are very noticeable. And you feel a lot more confident that you're actually torquing to the right value with the CDI wrench. So that was a nice upgrade. Anyway, so that's a few of my favorite tools that I've picked up this year. If you have any questions about them, let me know in the comments below. If you aren't already subscribed, please consider it. And as always, thanks for watching.